So, I am Bridget Bardot, for all you know, your girl behind the counter, and I have the pleasure of speaking to Stephen Wozniak, who played Jerry in the contemporary genre bending feature film The Love Witch, directed by Anna Biller. We recently saw a nice comment Stephen left for us on one of our Love Witch posts, and we got in touch to do an interview. And Stephen, you graciously accepted. Thank you so much for joining us at the Counter Crew.
Got it. Hi.
Hello. So let's start going and talking about the Love Witch.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So how were you approached with the role of Jerry, and what were your initial thoughts about the film project?
I initially, I think my agent at the time submitted me as he was known to do with a lot of regularity, and I just guest starred on NCIS Los Angeles, so he's like, okay, hot to trot, let's move you around, what's going on? But it was the middle of the summer, and it's kind of a dead period, or it was
Hmm.
kind of a slow period, a very hot summer, and he said, hey, there's this interesting movie, it's called The Love Witch. Go to this little theater on Santa Monica Boulevard on Theater Row, and and check it out. So initially, I read for the role of Wayne that
Ooh.
Jeffrey Parise played, Jeffrey from The Young and the Restless and General Hospital and Supernatural and all these really great shows. And he's a great character actor. And um, but a year passed, so I didn't think anything of it. I sort of put my heart into it. I could tell it was sort of a unusual film, and that's it. I did my few takes, they smiled and clapped, and I left. So a year goes by, I get a call from casting, but it turns out it was actually
Oh,
Anna. So
wow.
she called on the phone, and I think her and Jared, the producer, did most of the casting. They were there in the session that I initially read for, but I think they may have also dealt with some kind of a casting associate. But she called me back, and I thought, oh, this is great. I love the role of Wayne. It's so awesome. She's going to give me the role of Wayne. And she said, well, this other guy got it, and he's really good.
Oh,
But I want you to play the husband of the Love Witch. And I was like, shit, that sounds like even better. Like,
heck
sign,
yeah.
sign me up. I didn't even have to read for it, and which is so rare. Actors, it's really rare for actors to get roles where they didn't read for it. So I thought, let's do this. And she let me know. She said, it's a small role, but it's a pivotal role. Just read the script and tell me what you think. So I read it, and I just was sort of like, you know, what is this? What is this movie? Like, why is this so? Why am I tilting my head like a dog trying to figure this movie out? Like, huh? But in a great way, in a great creative way. And I just thought, man, this is so different and strange. And, even though actors' feelings can get bruised by the proportion of the size of the role, I didn't give
Hmm.
a shit. I just thought, yeah, I want to do this. This is going to be a lot of fun. There'll be some cool people. And I actually had not seen Viva, her previous feature, but had heard a lot about that too. So I thought this will be great. And there were a few weeks ahead for shooting, so it gave me a little bit of time to work on it. And yeah, that was that. So I said yes. I said yeah.
Nice. And wow, what like a great opportunity to like receive, and also like what a chance, what like a happenstance.
Exactly. And you sort of you get a vibe for these things, and you just say, all right, I'm going to jump in. You sort of can't sort of half guess it. You just go. So I went.
Yeah. So do you have any real life inspirations that you drew on for the role of Jerry?
I do. There are a couple of people who I call on routinely for a lot of different roles that I play. But I knew that we saw so little of Jerry on screen that I had to make it count. So the guy's a bit of a scoundrel. He's a bit of a coward. And I thought, well, he's got to be, you've got to hit home right away. It doesn't have to be over the top, but it's got to be a big brushstrokes kind of performance. So um, I know in my life, my mother's kind of a very dramatic
Oh
sort of
wow.
face maker, which is probably part of what got me interested in acting. And she's kind of like a high contrast German expressionist block print from the 30s, very
Ooh.
highly lit on one side. And to me, that's she has that in her person. I thought, all right, I'm going to use some of that. And it's not that it's not that I feel like she presents herself from another era or as depicted in features, but it's sort of sort of the bigness and the, I want to get my point across kind of thing. And so I thought, all right, I'll bring mom in on this one.
Yeah, and that's such a special quality that you have as an actor to go and like bring your family like into this role and to really bring a lot of your life into a movie that can seem like possibly a little bit distant.
uh, yeah, a little bit distant, a little bit bigger than, everyday life. So it was, yeah, it was kind of cool to do that. So it was fun.
So, the acting style of The Love Witch is very particular and really draws on a type of acting style usually seen in classic cinema. How did you find the process of acting in a more like classic cinema style?
It's a great question, and it was a little bit strange for me, sort of acting in that style. I mean, I remember after reading the script, I was compelled. I don't think I spoke with Anna about it, but I was sort of compelled to watch some of the very colorful melodramas from the '50s. One of which is the Douglas Sirk's famous "Bigger Than Life." It's a lot of movie and a lot of drama packed into a 2 hour movie, and I just thought, yeah, that's a good start. But The Love Witch, that I could even tell in the script, was based on a lot of different genres and eras. It was,
Hmm.
Hammer horror movies and Douglas Sirk and '70s exploitation and, a lot of different film noir. It was so many different genres that I sort of had to be mindful of all of those things. As much as I looked like some guy who was out of a 1973 exploitation movie, I got the look part covered. Then I had to sort of concern myself on how he reacted to other performers. He was a little bit defensive, not so cagey, sort of a phony, seductive way to sort of
Hmm.
cover up all his own pain and sort of bullshit. And but it ultimately felt pretty weird. It
I
made
can
sense, but
imagine.
it felt pretty weird. It didn't feel very natural to me, So, but Anna said at one of the screenings in Los Angeles that she didn't coach anybody
Hmm.
in the movie except for Samantha, who played
Really
Elaine,
interesting.
which I thought was strange. Like none of us got together and said, okay, we're gonna choose this style and this pace and this approach, and we're going to sort of do these things on these marks and this way. And none of us did that. And I thought that was strange because when you see the movie, it's pretty cohesive. And
Yeah.
Anna is she's, she's quite a collaborator. And I'll get into that later. But so she's not like this creative whip cracker who's like, why did Gian just did this and this scene? You better do the exact same thing this way. But, according to your character, she didn't do anything like that. So
Hmm.
it somehow sort of magically came together. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have suspected that at all. I would have assumed that this was just like a giant table read and like everyone got notes.
Absolutely. Yeah, we
Like
didn't
it's
do
so cohesive.
anything like that. Yeah, I know. That's the weird thing about it. It's part of the magic of the Love Witch.
So the photo in the witch's flight scene, the scene where Elaine is like really remembering Jerry, there's a headshot in that scene of you.
There
So is
is.
that actually your headshot or was that taken for the film specifically? I always
It,
assumed it was yours.
I looked at it and thought it was, but no, it's really funny that you point that out because it is not a hit shot. The very first, filming that we did was to take still photos of all of the men of Elaine's life. And
Hmm.
so me, Robert Seeley, Guy Keys, Jeff Parise, we all got together at this house in Los Feliz in East LA, and the DP David Mullen came in with just a regular, I can't remember what it was, but probably like a Nikon 35 millimeter camera, just a still camera,
Hmm.
and took a bunch of photos of us around the house, sort of in the garb that Elaine would see us in. One guy's a pilot, the other guy's sort of like he's the hippie professor, and I'm the real, the bastard husband. So, but
You
yeah, it
played
looks
really
kind of
well.
exciting. And it's funny because, when you see um, photos, sort of bedside photos of characters in movies from the 50s through even up through the 80s or late 80s or whatever, you see what is obviously a headshot. It's really well
Yeah.
lit, maybe over sort of airbrushed or photoshopped or whatever. And I think, you don't see that as much anymore. And I think Anna was really like, huh, that's an idea. I don't want to put words or, ideas in her brain, but it felt like a very conscious Anna thing to do. So yes, not my headshot, but yes, it could have been.
Yeah, I thought you
But
just
in
had
a different era.
in a different era, you would have had that headshot.
I would have had that headshot in 1973. Yeah, totally.
How was the process of working with a female director versus a male director? Did you find anything was like different, perhaps, or is it exactly the same?
I would be a liar if I said it was exactly the same. Because I think, depending on crews and cast, some crews are used to a certain way of working versus another, and some are more vocal about it than others. But I mean, when I worked with Anna, I had already worked with one, two, I think I'd already worked with 4 female directors. So it's not a big deal to me anyways, but I had already worked with other women directors, and it's either, you work with people who are good or who aren't, and it shows up on the first day of shooting. It shows up at the table reading. And I knew she was, she had this thing covered. And, um, but, I just don't like the idea of thinking what I know it means to work with a director or crew member who's, either male or female. I'd rather just focus on the work and communicate well with the director. And there was, however, an issue on the set. I wasn't aware of it. I tend to try to roll with it when I can, unless it's a gross infraction of somebody's work or rights or their person. Then I put my fucking foot down and just,
Good.
I'll yell stop camera, and nobody likes that. Um, but I learned a lot later that Anna went through a lot of stress because of the perception of her as a female director from some crew who sort of grumbled some stuff under their breath, or weren't as accepting of her pace. I thought her pace was pretty brisk, considering that there were a lot of things to manage on that set,
Yeah.
props and lights and all of these things that she primarily designed, and she made a lot of them too. She didn't make all of them, but she made a lot of them, and to sort of organize that and direct a scene and all that, it's really tough stuff. I mean, I've directed music videos, and I used to have a production company, and I know how really hard it is. And so I was really bummed to hear that in real life, because we're friends. We didn't just work together, but we're friends. And the good news is that she's not quiet about it, and that's why we love her.
Yeah. And I wish I didn't have to ask a question like this. In truth, I kind of worry that it's a little bit too putting people in a box. So I wish I didn't have to ask
No,
that
it's
question.
this is this time more than ever. When the movie came out, this was the beginning of the Trump era, and I think all of us were really, we weren't very happy about that. And but Anna said something really unique, and I can't remember what it was, but because of the coincidence of the release of it, it sort of made us all pay more attention to the really sort of visible, ostensibly powerful, sort of officious autocrats and idiots that are out there in the world. And this is about the time that Harvey Weinstein was getting looked into, and all these people were being looked at. And in a certain way, it's a good time that movie came out what it did, and that Anna did a lot of press to help explain everything from her feelings about the story to her own experience on the set. So it sucks, but I'm glad you asked it, and I'm glad the timing sort of made sense.
So since I do run a horror channel, I gotta ask some questions about horror in general.
Totally,
So
absolutely.
so what are your favorite horror movies, Steven?
I have three, which were previously two, until I saw the third one when I saw it. I've always loved The Exorcist, the original Exorcist from 1973.
Yes, great choices.
Such a brilliant movie, and I grew up in the Metro DC area, so I know all the locations. So
Oh,
when I used to have a fake ID and go to nightclubs, many many years ago, my brother and friends and I would go to these locations and look at the spooky steps where the priest falls down the stairs and dies at the end, and all these really horrible things. But I'm a big fan of that, mostly because it was just the circumstances seem so believable. I think great horror movies not necessarily about thrusting you into this sort of unending chamber of horrors until you come out mutilated and raped and dissected and all this stuff. It's more just like, if you can imagine yourself in the lives of the central characters, and then this thing happens, that makes the horror worse than the idea. It makes it feel real, and The Exorcist does that. And I think The Shining is also right up there, if for different reasons. I think there's a little bit more elegance and art to it. They're all beautifully shot and wonderfully performed, but Jack Nicholson's kabuki theater interpretation of that role is brilliant, but it's a very different kind of acting than the stuff you see in The Exorcist. It just makes sense for someone who's in their head and finally escapes from their head, or their typewriter or whatever he was. My last is Let the Right One In, from about 10 years,
choice.
which is so like, a couple of people said, this is brilliant. I'm friends with a couple of horror journalists who watch everything, and this one friend of mine, Stacey Lane Wilson, said, you got to go see this movie. It's called Let the Right One In. And I said, okay, sure. She's like, yeah, it's about this. And I was like, no, stop. No, don't. It's about this anything.
It's going to ruin it.
I don't want to hear anything. And she just said, okay, but, watch it and pay attention and, read the subtitles, but you better keep your eyes on the screen. I said, okay, great. I thought that was also really brilliant. I thought that was just dreamy and frightening, and who tells stories like that from the point of view of a kid? It takes you all the way through it. If you don't just dive in and come back and, hey, this is the way a kid feels in a sitcom, a kid with like adult dialogue for adults to watch.
Yeah.
It's like they take you all the way in, and I love shit like that. So anyway, so those are my three.
I would just like to say those are some fantastic choices. Some of your choices actually wound up on my favorite horror movies list.
Well, cool. I want to learn more about yours, so I can watch more.
Yeah, I totally love Let the Right One In. I actually saw that one as a child, so it was really weird seeing like something from like a child's point of view. And I always
have you seen it in recent times as an adult?
I haven't. I actually haven't gotten around to it.
You may want to see how your perspectives change.
Yeah.
Maybe it hasn't changed. Who knows?
Yeah, I found that movie fascinating. I find the gender dynamics in that movie absolutely fascinating, and I love the fact that you bring that movie up, because I feel like in this era of 2020, it's not brought up enough. And it was so special.
It is. It is. It really is one of those. So, yeah, I love it. So, as long as they're smart and filled with humanity, and of course, there's got to be a fair amount of blood, then they're good.
I've noticed in your previous work a fair amount of projects from the horror genre, from Psycho Beach Party to Elevator to Exorcism. What do you find draws you to the genre?
And don't forget Scarecrow.
Oh.
I did a movie called The Scarecrow a while ago, too. That was a lot of fun that my friend Jason White wrote. Shout out to Jason White. And, as a character actor, I'm generally drawn to roles before the projects. If the role is something I haven't done, or I think I can play in a way that I haven't done, even if it's written in a way that may be traditional or even typical for a genre film, I'm sort of in it. For Elevator, I did a favor to a friend who's a producer on the movie and just sort of came in and did a role. And then Exorcism was strictly about the role. The movie was, there's some good people in it. It was very verbose. There's a lot of dialogue in it that I probably would have chose differently, but I'm not the director. So, but I really liked the role, so I thought, well, this character needed some redemption, and I sort of understood the guy and the circumstances, and maybe I needed some personal redemption. But I wasn't a junkie or an inner city gang member or anything like that. So those things I had to study. So, but yeah.
Yeah, and I find it very interesting that you are very drawn to challenging roles. Like it seems like your role in Exorcism was very challenging, as well as your role of Jerry as well.
Yeah, yeah, I really do play these fringe dwellers. They're sort of psychos, fringe dwellers, rock and rollers, savior figures, really misunderstood um, people. And very often I don't understand them, and that's why I want to play them. Or I'm even scared of them. I don't, a misunderstanding to the point of fright is where a lot of people go. It goes, you turn up the volume from 1 to 11 really quickly, and it causes panic and chaos, and actually a lot of what's
Yeah.
going on in the country right now. And um, I think it's sort of my job as an actor to sort of get into those characters and make a distinction between my misunderstanding and maybe an audience's misunderstanding, and outright fear that they might have of a character. If I can sort of get them somewhere in the middle, maybe experiencing the misunderstanding, but not giving up on that character in their fear, then maybe people who do need a chance will be given a chance. So that sounds so heroic and ridiculous, but that's part of why I act.
Aw. If you could work with any genre director, who would you work with?
I am going to give you a living and a dead.
Never
Since
specify.
we're talking horror movies, living and dead.
A lot of
Uh,
directors.
Living, I'd say Guillermo del Toro, who's a really amazing guy and such a brilliant person. And I'm really lucky to have met him through a friend of mine, Doug Jones, who's been
Oh.
in a lot of his movies. And I was promoting a movie at Fangoria Fest in Burbank a number of years ago, and he was up, I don't know, talking about one of his movies. And afterwards, he grabbed me by the face. And Guillermo del Toro is a big dude,
Whoa.
huge dude. He's this big giant. He's a heavy guy. He's a tall guy, and he grabs me by the face and he goes, "Look at that face! I need that face!" Like that in front of like a line of 100 fans and dozens, and then hundreds and hundreds of fans sitting waiting for his sort of talk on the film.
Wow.
And I just looked at him and I was like, "Yeah, I think you need that face too. Sign me up." Of course, that hasn't happened yet, but
It will.
it will. I'm going to keep. I'm going to stay on the manifestation train and keep my fingers crossed for that. For my no longer alive, I would probably say Mario Bava or
Mm.
Wes Craven. I'm not a fan of all Wes Craven movies, but his early stuff really does freak me out. And I was very lucky to be in a remake of The Last House on the Left called Chaos that originally involved David Hess, who played the lead bad guy in the original Last House on the Left. He ended up doing another project, but Mark Scheffler was involved in that, who was in the original Last House. And I got to work with Kevin Gage, who's an amazing character actor from movies like G.I. Jane and Heat, and also my friend Sage Stallone, late Sage Stallone. So it had some great pluses to it that were worth it to me. So that was my closest connection to Wes.
An
That's the
amazing
best I can do. He's
connection.
no longer around, so that's the best I can do for those. But yeah, those are, I like those people. They're good.